Hey, this is Brian with worshiptutorials.com. You are about to watch a short clip from a longer video that Pastor Brian Fuller and I made on how to encourage and increase congregational engagement in your worship services. If you want to watch the full clip, the full video, you can click the link below and it will take you there. Enjoy. Thanks for watching.
We have to ask ourselves the question, what is engagement? What exactly are we looking for? Because most of us have probably played in bands at some point, out in either a secular market or, some sort of coffee house experience. And so we kind of measure engagement just from our people and do they look like they're enjoying themselves? So we do have to define what engagement is, because otherwise we may be looking for something that's not really not there, and B, not even really supposed to be there. So we have to decide what it means when people are engaged, and it's different for everybody. Some people don't like to sing, so we're asking them to do something that they don't really like doing. I mean, how many times as a worship leader we're like, all right guys, let's sing it together, and nobody sings it.
And that happens often.
Yeah, so we're thinking, why aren't you singing the song? Well, the truth is this, you're asking a guy who just worked 75 hours, an electrician, who has never sang in his life, right. And now all of a sudden on Sunday you expect him to just sing out a verse and a chorus of the latest Hillsong. And so we have to really ask ourselves, what does engagement look like? Otherwise, we can get really frustrated as worship leaders, and we can spend our whole lives going, they just don't like me, or what I'm doing is not working. And so I think really identifying what engagement is very important.
I give you a personal example. So when I lead, obviously I sing, and I'm engaged most of the time. But when I'm not leading, I'm often the guy with my hands in my pockets. And I tell this to my team a lot. I say to my teams, if you look and somebody and they're not engaged on their face, it doesn't mean that they're not engaged in their spirit, in their mind. Yeah. Because some people are just like that. Some people just kind of stand there and watch. But it doesn't mean they're not engaged. So I would say don't be discouraged if you see a person not singing, not physically engaged.
Yeah, I'll give you another example. My wife and I, about a year ago, went to a Bon Jovi concert.
All right.
They were in town, and we got free tickets. Thought, what the heck? And so my wife she's like, she's not a musician at all. So she's here jamming, bouncing around all these songs she heard when she was in high school and college. And I'm sitting here like this. And I'm having the time of my life.
Yeah.
And she's looking at me going, are you enjoying yourself? I'm like, yeah. And so the engagement was different for each of us. For her, it was jumping up, celebrating, singing all these songs that she used to know. And then for me, it was evaluating the band. How tight are they? What songs are they doing? So it was a different experience. So Bon Jovi could have looked at me and go, well, the dude's not really enjoying himself, but that lady seems to be having a good time. So you have to know what engagement really means. And when you're talking about a congregation, you're talking about hundreds, maybe thousands even, of people that are all different, that are all from different places, different walks in life, different preferences, different styles. Some of them like pop, some of them like rock, some of them like blues. So it's kind of unrealistic to think that engagement would simply be everyone raising their hands and singing and clapping, because the truth is most people don't do that. Some people will, because that's what they enjoy and that's what they do, but you can't look at the whole and expect that from everyone, and if we do, that's not really engagement. And so you have to understand everybody's level of engagement is going to look different. And you may not even figure that out, but you can get to a point where your congregation, you kind of know when they're engaged and when they're not. Now, you can tell when the other extreme, you can tell when people aren't engaged. They're checking their watches, they got their hands over their ears, they're looking at the bulletin, they're texting. Okay, that's pretty safe to say they're not engaged. But that doesn't mean they're not engaged because of what you're doing. There could be something going on in their life. So I think as a whole, you have to just assume in a room full of a couple hundred people, our goal is to get a lot of them engaged in worship. But certainly human nature is going to dictate that some of them won't be. Right. And that's okay. Once we identify what engagement looks like, because you hit it right on the head, Brian, First of all, I can't remember who said it, but somebody said, never compare your life to someone else's highlight reel.
Yes.
Because that happens so many times.
It's a social media thing.
Yeah, so it happens so many times. We watch the latest live conference from Hillsong, and we're like, why can't our Sunday be like that?
Right.
Well, that's not a good sample of what life is really like. Right. Anytime you go to a worship conference, the engagement's gonna be higher because the people who are there to engage in worship, and they've spent money and they've made investments in time, and they're there because they want to do that. But a lot of times in churches, like I said, it's not. It might be some guy who this is his first time ever at church. Right. You have to consider this. I doubt that at a Hillsong conference in New York, there are a lot of people that have no idea who Hillsong is. Right. They're fans of Hillsong, and so you have to really consider that. And then once you figure that out, which is really important, and I would also say that you don't have to figure this out on your own. You have other team members. You have obviously your senior pastor is a great. I know for me, if I'm feeling a certain way about a certain Sunday, I'll ask Pastor Benji, hey, what did you think about today? How did you feel? Because there are some days where I go, man, I just feel like people were not engaged. And my pastor will say, I thought they were heavily engaged today. Yeah. And so sometimes you might just be having a bad day. But I do think it's important to come up with kind of a consistent expectation for yourself. What's realistic? What can I expect? And then you can kind of go from there. Maybe it was a little less than I expected. Maybe it was a little more than I expected. But I do think it's important to expect something and be realistic for what it is you're expecting. I think to expect to walk in on a Sunday morning at 8 a.m. and start a service and expect everybody right after they got out of their car and put their kids in children's ministry and maybe grabbed a coffee and then stumbled into the service that they were thinking about sleeping in anyways, to suddenly at the top of their lungs sing Alive by Hillsong and dance to all these synth parts. It's kind of unrealistic when you think about it. But if you go through the entire service and you see no engagement, then I think that's important to address that and go, hey, are there things we're doing that are getting in the way of people engaging? And I think that's where you start to kind of transition into how can we make them more engaged and what are some things we can do to increase the engagement.